Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are back with another edition of Sermon Rewind.
Great to be here.
I'm your host, and today we are opening up a stack of notes that honestly feels a little bit like walking into a glass door. You think the path is clear, and then wham, you realize you weren't seeing things quite right.
That is a visceral image to start with, but it's actually very appropriate for the text we are covering today.
We're digging into a recent message from Pastor Matthew. The text is James chapter 1, verses 19 through 27. And the topic is spiritual freedom. Now, I have to be honest, when I saw that title, Spiritual Freedom, I was expecting something a little lighter. Breaking chains, running through a field of wheat, that sort of thing.
Sure, the cinematic version of freedom, the swelling orchestral music.
Exactly. But Pastor Matthew's notes take a hard left turn almost immediately. He argues that what we typically think of as freedom is actually a trap.
Right.
And the real definition of freedom involves words that make modern people, myself included, very itchy. Words like submission and obedience.
It is the central paradox, isn't it? In our current cultural moment, freedom has a very specific, almost rigid definition. It means autonomy.
Right. It means no restrictions, the open road, no speed limits, nobody telling me what to do. I am the captain of my soul. That's the dream.
It is. But the mission of this deep dive is to unpack why that version of freedom, total autonomy might actually be a form of self-deception.
Okay.
Pastor Matthew argues that true freedom isn't about casting off all restraints. It's about finding the right restraints. And that's a concept that requires us to completely rewire how we think.
So we're going to dismantle my entire understanding of liberty.
Great. Before we get into the psychological breakdown of how we deceive ourselves, let's set the scene. Pastor Matthew starts with some context.
Yeah, and we can't skip this part because it really explains the tone. James is writing to a group he calls scattered Christians.
Scattered. That feels familiar. It feels like 2026. It does. It implies fragmentation. These are believers living in a culture that doesn't share their values. They're under pressure, maybe dealing with isolation, and all that stress was coming out in some very specific behaviors.
The notes highlight three things. They weren't listening. They were, quote, running their mouths, and they were getting angry.
I feel like you just described my Twitter feed.
Or a standard Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, but here's the crucial connection Pastor Matthew makes, and this sets up everything else. He says these weren't just personality quirks. It wasn't just that these people were naturally loud or grumpy.
Right.
These behaviors, the shouting, the anger, were symptoms of spiritual self-deception. They were trying to navigate a hostile world on their own terms.
On their own terms. I want to dig into that because the notes introduce a concept here called worldly wisdom. And this is where I think I usually get tripped up.
How so?
When I hear worldly wisdom, I think of obviously bad stuff like atheism, hedonism, greed. But the notes describe it differently.
Much differently. And this is the danger. Pastor Matthew uses three adjectives to describe it. Subtle, reasonable, and socially acceptable.
Okay, stop there. Reasonable.
Yeah.
Why is reasonable a bad thing? If I'm angry because someone treated me unfairly, isn't it reasonable to tell them off?
In our modern cultural context, absolutely. That's considered emotional health.
We're told to speak your truth.
Exactly. Validate your feelings. If you feel it, it's real, and therefore it's valid to act on it. That is what the world calls wisdom. It's pragmatic. It protects you.
So you're saying that defending myself is a trap?
I'm saying, and traditional Christianity argues this, that if your standard for truth is what feels reasonable to me right now, you have made yourself God.
Wow. Okay.
You see, the scattered Christians were just mirroring the culture around them. Everyone else was shouting, so they shouted. It felt reasonable. It felt justified.
But it wasn't God's nature.
Exactly. Divine wisdom often looks unreasonable to the human ego. It looks like turning the other cheek. It looks like being slow to speak when you desperately want to win an argument.
So the trap is that it feels so normal.
So normal. It feels safe, but it leads to a drift away from the truth.
And that drift is what we need to map out. Pastor Matthew lays out this framework, the 3 stages of spiritual self-deception. And it's not a cliff you fall off. It's more like a slope.
It's a very gentle slope.
Let's walk through them, because I have a feeling I'm going to recognize myself here. Stage 1 is awareness.
Right. This is the starting point. The notes define it simply as that internal sense that something's wrong.
The pinch.
The pinch, the prickly feeling. In Christian theology, we call this the conviction of the Holy Spirit. Maybe you snapped at your spouse, or you fudged a number on an expense report. You know it's there.
So stage 1 isn't the sin itself, It's the notification.
Correct. It's the check engine light on your dashboard.
Yeah.
Awareness is actually a mercy. It's God inviting you to deal with something before the engine blows up.
Hey, we don't like check engine lights. They're annoying.
They imply maintenance is required. And maintenance takes time.
Which brings us to stage 2, procrastination.
The notes define this as the internal dialogue of, I'll get to it later.
I'm busy right now. I have a deadline. I'll deal with my anger issues next week when things calm down.
Exactly. And this is probably the most common trap in our hyperactive culture. We're terrified of stopping. But let's look at what's really happening. We rarely say no to God outright.
Yeah, that feels too rebellious. That's a villain monologue. I don't do that.
No, we're more subtle. We say, not yet. We say, let me just get through this season. But as time goes on, that not yet functionally becomes a no.
That is heavy. Not yet. Eventually calcifies into no.
It's just a polite no. It protects our ego. We can still tell ourselves we intend to obey. We're just waiting for the right time. But the spiritual reality is that delayed obedience is disobedience.
And the longer you wait, the harder your heart gets.
Which sets us up for stage 3. We've ignored the light, we've put off the mechanic, and now we have to live with the noise. Stage 3 is rationalization.
This is the defense mechanism.
Yep. The notes define this as the shift to saying, I'm not so bad.
This is the comparison game.
It is. Once you've ignored the Spirit's prompting for long enough, you have to justify why you're still a good person. And the easiest way to do that is to look around and find someone worse.
Well, I might gossip a little bit, but look at Steve. Steve is a disaster.
Exactly. I might have a temper, but I'm not cheating on my taxes. We grade on a curve. But here is the critique from the source material. The standard isn't your neighbor. The standard is holiness. The standard is Christ.
Oof. We lower the bar so we can step over it without stretching.
Precisely. And Pastor Matthew's conclusion on this is stark. This process leads to bondage. You think you're free because you're avoiding the hard work, but you're actually a slave to your own impulses.
You're just stuck in the loop.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the bad news. That's the diagnosis. But the sermon notes don't leave us there. They pivot to God's way. And he uses a word I appreciate. He says God's way is simple.
Simple, but not easy.
Right. It's not complex physics, but it requires effort. The notes list 4 steps, and it starts with that analogy from James about the mirror.
The famous mirror of the word.
Step 1 is look intentionally into the word. Now, talk to me about the difference between looking and whatever else we do.
James compares the person who hears but doesn't do to someone who glances in a mirror, sees their face, goes away, and immediately forgets what they look like.
Which is absurd. If I look in the mirror and I have spinach in my teeth, I don't just say, oh, interesting, and walk away.
You fix it. But spiritually, we do this all the time. We read a verse that says, be quick to listen, and we realize, wow, I am a terrible listener. And then we close the Bible and pick up our phone.
We glance. We don't gaze.
The notes emphasize intentionality. It's a deep study. It's letting the text read you. In a world of skimming and scrolling, actually sitting with a text until it exposes your heart is a radical act.
It's the spinach moment. You have to be willing to see the spinach.
Right.
Okay, step 2. And honestly, this is the one where I think most modern people, myself included, we balk. Step 2 is stay under its authority.
Yeah, authority. That is a trigger word.
It is. We are allergic to it. In our culture, authority is the opposite of
freedom. It's seen as oppressive, as restrictive.
No gods, no masters. But Pastor Matthew flips this upside down. He argues that staying under the authority of the word is the prerequisite for freedom. Explain that, because that sounds like war is peace logic to my modern ears.
Yeah.
How does submission make you free?
Okay, let's use an analogy. Think about a fish. If a fish wants freedom from the water, if it demands the autonomy to go live on the beach, what happens?
It flops around and dies. It suffocates.
Right. Because a fish was designed for water. Its freedom isn't the absence of boundaries. Its freedom is living within the environment it was designed for.
So for the fish, the water is a restriction. It can't go climb a tree, but it's also the only place it can be fully alive.
Exactly. When we submit to God's authority, when we stay under the word, we are like the fish jumping back into the water. To the world, it looks like we're limiting ourselves. But internally, it's the only place the human soul can breathe.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Submission isn't crushing, it's positioning.
That's the argument. And that leads directly to step 3. Practice what we learn.
Moving from theory to action.
This connects right back to the title of the sermon, The Deception of Listening Without Doing. You can stare at the mirror all day, agree the mirror is authoritative, but if you don't wipe the spinach off your teeth, you're still dirty.
I noticed the word practice is used in the notes. Why that word?
I love that word choice. Practice implies repetition. It implies you might not get it perfect the first time. The Christian life isn't a performance, it's a practice. You are training yourself. It's muscle memory.
And finally, step 4. This feels like the safety net for all the perfectionists. Trust the grace of God.
This is crucial. If you leave this out, this whole deep dive just becomes moralism. It becomes try harder.
And try harder always leads to either burnout or pride. Look how good I am at practicing.
Exactly. But step 4 reminds us, we aren't obeying to earn God's love. We are relying on his grace to empower the obedience. It's a cycle. Grace motivates the obedience, and obedience helps us experience more grace.
Okay, so we have the trap and we have the path. But the notes have a section here labeled Big Takeaway. And it's a simple equation.
Yes, desire equals doing.
Desire equals doing. Okay, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because I often desire to eat a salad, but I do eat a cheeseburger.
Well, Pastor Matthew, and pretty much every philosopher in history, would argue that in that specific moment, your greater desire was the cheeseburger. We ultimately do what we want. We follow our strongest affection.
So if I'm not obeying God, if I'm constantly choosing worldly wisdom, it's not just a discipline problem.
No, it's a love problem. It means I desire my comfort or my reputation or my anger more than I desire him.
That stings. Because I can't just force myself to want a salad. And I can't just force myself to want to be patient when I'm annoyed.
You cannot just modify behavior from the outside in. This is where the source material gets into the concept of the new heart, or what James calls the implanted word.
The implant.
Right, the implanted word. This is the supernatural element. You cannot just try harder. You need a change of nature. You need God to plant a new desire inside you.
So the invitation here, the only way to be truly free is to receive that implanted word, to ask for the heart transplant.
Yes. We don't obey in order to get a new heart. We get a new heart so that we can obey. The doing is the natural fruit of the desire that God plants in us.
So if you're struggling to obey, the answer isn't just to grit your teeth. It's to go back to the source and say, change my want to.
That's the core of it.
You know, this whole discussion makes me realize something uncomfortable. I love information. I love podcasts. But I often settle for just knowing the right answers.
That brings us right back to rationalization. I know the truth, so I must be living the truth.
But I'm not. I'm just a guy with a very accurate map who is standing still.
And James warns us that that is the ultimate deception, to be a hearer only.
So let's get practical. The notes conclude with 4 questions to ask the Holy Spirit. And I think we should read these out slowly. I'm going to challenge everyone listening and myself to actually do this.
I think that's essential. This is the mirror moment.
Question number 1, make me aware.
That is a dangerous prayer. You are asking for the pinch. You are saying, God, show me the blind spots.
Question number 2, what have I been putting off?
Confronting procrastination head on. Is there a conversation you need to have? An apology you owe?
Question number 3, what have I been rationalizing?
Where are you playing the comparison game? Where are you saying, I'm not so bad, instead of, Lord, have mercy?
And finally, question number 4, what step of obedience can I take?
Notice it's singular. Just one step. What is the immediate practical thing you can do today?
Maybe it's deleting an app. Maybe it's sending that text. Maybe it's just staying silent when you want to yell.
It's simple, but it's the only way to break the cycle.
It brings us right back to that paradox we started with. We think freedom is keeping our options open, but real freedom is found on the other side of that one step of obedience.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this Sermon Rewind, I want to leave you with one final thought. We live in the golden age of content. You can listen to thousands of sermons, podcasts, audiobooks. You could fill every silent moment.
But there is a real danger in that abundance.
The huge danger. Are we mistaking consuming content for spiritual growth? In an age of information overload, are you mistaking hearing a deep dive for doing the truth? Because you can have the best theology in the world, but if it doesn't move your hands and feet, James says you're just deceiving yourself.
True freedom isn't found in the headphones. It's found in the doing.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.